The music's on, the disco ball has dropped, and it's time to get this party started. You're listening to episode 6 of DiscoTrek, a Star Trek Discovery After Party podcast here on the Tricorder Transmissions Network. I'm your host, Heather Barker, and with me at the turntable is my co-host, back from a wonderful trip down to Mickey Mouse, our Jeff Hewlett. How are you doing tonight, Jeff?
I am doing great, Heather. Thank you. It's a little better late than never to record this one.
Yeah, a little delayed this week because of your trip. Hopefully you didn't run into any Gorn friends down at Disney World.
No, all the lizards were really, really small, so I dominated.
And they helped you with your laundry and housekeeping, right?
Absolutely.
All right. So for those who aren't familiar with the podcast, we're a community-based Star Trek discotheque of sorts, focusing on each episode of Discovery as they air. Tonight we'll be discussing episode 7, Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. Another really long, wonderful TOS-like title, and I think that the episode stood up to the name. With us to talk about the episode are 2 members of the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group on Facebook, which is the exclusive gateway to gain admission onto the show. We have a very international show tonight. So hailing from Canada is our great friend and host to one of our new shows on Tricorder Transmissions Network, debuting this month. That is Barry DeFord. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's wonderful to be here, and I look forward to talking about magic to make the sanest man go mad.
Yes, and we look forward to introducing PoliTreks to everyone very, very soon. You and Shashank will be hosting that, and we're excited to have you join us on the network.
Oh, I'm very excited too.
Great. Our next guest is a great friend from STLV who we met this year. He found us via our Shore Leave podcast and the unofficial group. Hailing from the wonderful land down under of Australia is Jamie McGregor. Jamie, welcome. Nice to hear your voice again.
Thank you very much. Great to be on the show, and a big thanks to you and Jeff for making my first visit to STLV a bit of fun. Great to be appearing from the future, given this is a time loop episode. For me, I'm in your tomorrow today. So, if this all doesn't work, I'll get on a plane, come over there, and we'll do it all over again.
Sounds good to me. I love that you're coming to us from the future, which I've heard is so much better than the present, right? So much better.
Of course it is. There's optimism galore in the future, let me tell you.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, so we're going to hop into our discussion in just a second, but first we have some DJ duty to do. As we've mentioned, DiscoTrek is community-focused and evolved from our convention group. Basically, we wanted to give our friends and family a way to talk about Discovery. So for your chance to pop on the show, make sure you hop onto Facebook and join the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group. We will add you in, and then you'll see our DiscoTrek post every Tuesday. You can comment on that post to be entered to win. Let's see, we record generally on Monday nights, so you'll find that information in that post. Once you've been on the podcast, you can't enter again, but there are other ways to be a part of the discussion. Jeff, do you want to tell people how they can do that?
Of course. So on the Sunday prior to the new episode of Discovery airing, we'll make a post in the group, and making a comment on that post may get you included on the next night's recording. You can also call into the show and leave a 2-minute voicemail, or an up to 2-minute voicemail, that is, at 609-512-LLAP, that's 5527, for a chance for your message to be played on the show.
And we just had an addition to our Patreon family today. Do you want to tell people about that?
Of course. So big shout out to our friend, Mr. Carl Wonders, who's been on the show before. We love you, Carl. Thanks so much for your very, very generous contribution to our Patreon page. And if you guys out there are interested in becoming patrons yourself, you can find it at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions, or you can visit our website at thetricordertransmissions.com and click on the big Patreon link on the right-hand side. Really quickly, becoming a patron gives you instant access to our unedited shows as we record them, including this episode that we are recording right now, will be available immediately after we are finished.
Fun. All right. Well, the way DiscoTrek works, we break it down into 3 segments. Drop the record, which is our opening remarks and reactions. Play a new track, where we explore what we've learned that's new in the Star Trek universe. And spin it again. We look back at standout moments, scenes, characters, anything that we feel is worth a little extra attention. So from here on out, please be advised, Black Alert, there are going to be spoilers. They will be episode spoilers. They may be fan theory spoilers. So if you have not seen the episode, please stop right now. Go watch the episode and come back to join us. Okay, so let's get started. Let's drop the record. Okay, magic to make the sanest man go mad. I'm glad I said it right, because that's a mouthful. Barry, what did you think about this episode?
Well, I watched it with a good friend of mine who is also an English language arts teacher. I teach high school and junior high English language arts up here in rural Alberta, and he and I are both Star Trek fans. And one thing that we found that was probably the most inspiring thing was Harry Mudd himself. Mm-hmm. He fails so many times, and he just gets back on that horse and he keeps doing it. He really is the ideal student. I feel like what we would want to do more than anything is give my kids all a time crystal and just let them do it over and over again, and they can literally rage quit every single time and they just start over again. So I actually kind of, I don't know, part of me almost wants to show this episode to my students to be like, see, look at this guy. He just keeps coming back. So you guys should do it as well. So I think that's probably my biggest opening remark, other than I was really hoping Kelsey Grammer was going to show up on a Soyuz class at the end of this. Of course, this is a bit of a homage to Cause and Effect, and maybe a bit of retconning. I don't know. Maybe the Enterprise D rammed into one of these things floating around in space, and that's what happened with Kelsey Grammer's ship as well. I'm not too sure, but any chance I get to see Frasier, I'm always really happy. So yeah, that would basically be my opening remarks. A very fun episode.
Awesome. All right, Jamie, what about you? What did you think?
In general, I'm a little bit more cautious about Discovery than perhaps most of your guests who have absolutely loved it from the start. Having said that, I'm not one of these, the nattering nabobs of negativism that you called out on last week's show very rightly. People who randomly tweet at and abuse the various actors and writers of the show. I think what I'm doing is I'm trusting the writers for now that some of the kind of bits that don't kind of sit or feel a little uneven are actually a consequence of the serialized nature of the show. Lorca in particular, I can't quite figure out, and there's a few things that I'm on the fence about. However, I thought this was a fantastic show. So obviously with all Star Trek episodes and in particular the time travel ones, you can nitpick to your heart's content about, plot and all of that kind of stuff. But what I thought really was fantastic in this show was it was a great character show for Burnham. Really, really a lot of development there, which really when it boils down to it, what the best thing about Star Trek to my mind are the characters. And we really got a sense in this show that the crew are gelling as one, and there's a bit of an ethos and a team spirit about the Discovery, which I hope continues and builds and grows. And anyway, so that was my immediate impression of the show. I don't know if that resonates with any of you.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And I love the fact that you pointed out that we got to know Michael Burnham a little bit better in this episode. I had heard, probably in a podcast I listened to, try to listen to all of them, and someone had mentioned, might have been Synthaholics, that this episode really made it feel like the show is more about Burnham. Like, even though it's kind of been pushed as that, it still felt like Burnham, Lorca, Stamets, Saru, etc. Like, it hasn't really felt focused on Burnham, but that this episode really made it feel that way for them. Jeff, did you have some thoughts there?
Yeah, well, I think starting off with a personal log from Burnham really drives that point home. I definitely felt this was more of a Burnham showcase, among a lot of other things. So, and, throwing back to Barry's point before about this being an inspirational episode, I think it may be a more inspirational episode of Discovery than any of the other ones before. I love when Star Trek indelibly links our lives to the Trek universe. So, like the Alice in Wonderland reference before, I found the fact that the Bee Gees still existing in the future, that means that all of us and everyone listening may very well be living in the same timeline as Captain Lorca and the Discovery crew. So Star Trek might actually be our future. That's pretty inspirational. But jokes aside, yeah, another really great episode. I've been really enjoying the last few. I've been getting super, super into it. Really great character moments for not just Burnham, but for Ash Tyler. Stamets had some great stuff in this one, and Mudd. And Saru even had a really nice little tiny moment that I picked up on. We can talk about a little bit later. But Rainn Wilson, I think, knocks it out of the park again as Mudd. So sinister with his repeated killing of Lorca. I think, was it 53 times?
Yeah.
In various sadistic ways, like beaming him into space and watching him choke to death. I mean, I knew his revenge plot was going to be good, but I didn't imagine it was going to be this good. So happy it kind of, well, not happy it panned out that way, but happy it panned out that way. Love the unexpected script flipped at the end. I like the Discovery keeps throwing me for a loop. Haha, pun intended. I just didn't see the end coming. I didn't know how they were going to resolve this thing. I mean, I knew they had to get out of the loop somehow, but I just didn't see that resolution coming. I love that they keep throwing me for these different angles. So, and I guess I'm really excited. I'm a time travel nerd. I love the fact that we have another method of time travel introduced here with the time crystal to go along with the traditional slingshot around the sun, cold starting the engines, Guardian of Forever. So, another brand new version of time travel introduced into Trek canon is always fun. So we can see that reused somewhere down the line too. So, and to go back to something I was talking about on previous episodes, I will continue my doubting of the Tyler versus Voq, Tyler is Voq theory, rather. I think this episode deals a very difficult blow to that theory that we can get into a little bit later.
Oh boy!
Yeah, we gotta talk about that.
Definitely.
Now, Barry, I'm not an English teacher, but I'm the son of two English teachers, and
I'm so sorry.
Yes, I know it's been traumatic. I'm constantly correcting people's grammar and punctuation and spelling, and it makes me very unpopular. But the one thing I did notice was the lovely way the writers brought in just little bits of Trek staples, kind of little bits here and there of stuff that we know to be a common kind of trope of Star Trek. Obviously, you mentioned the whole plot starts with a bit of a or is based on kind of cause and effect device. A little bit of Data's Day there with the daily log. A little bit of Remember Me in terms of Stamets working out that if there's nothing wrong with him, there has to be something wrong with the universe he's in. All that kind of stuff. So little bits and pieces, little bit of them at the end of the show trying to use the non vital parts of the ship to trick the villain. Like just nice little touches, I think, that we're grabbing little bits of Trek staples and putting them into a fantastic package.
Yeah, Rascals is that other episode where they used the secondary systems, right, to get themselves out of the conundrum they were in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree very much so that there's a lot of those little nods, the Mon Capitan or the pointy haired, or sorry, not pointy eared, but pointy foreheads and stuff like that. That happens there. Also, one of my worries, Jamie, you'd mentioned that still a little skeptical. One of my biggest concerns was that this was going to end up being Game of Thrones in space. This episode has thrown that right out the window for me. I had a lot of fun watching it, and also just wondering, and I'm going to throw things kind of in a little bit of a direction here, the Gormagander with its four-way opening mouth, is that a nod to a certain Netflix show where people have psionic powers and they fight demogorgons?
Oh. I noticed it was similar. I don't know that it's a direct reference.
I don't know. Yeah, I felt maybe, if anything, it might have been a bit of a cheeky nod, but who knows?
Your point about the lighter tone, though, I totally agree with. I remember even at STLV, I was thinking, hearing about the show from the creators and the serialized nature of it, I was kind of like, well, if it's serialized, how are they going to have the kind of variation in tone from episode to episode that Star Trek is so capable of? You can have a hugely emotionally draining episode one week and, the Ferengi appear the next week, and certainly this seemed to show that they have an ability to give you a bit of a lighter tone. And I totally agree. I had a huge amount of fun watching the episode as well, and it just shows that these guys know what they're doing.
Yeah. I feel like I need to do a word cloud and gather all these words that people are saying on social media every week, because we're on episode 7, and every week I hear it's more like Star Trek, like it's, as Jeff would say, Star Trekky. And especially for this episode, that it was fun. People seem to for a lot of people, it's like each episode gets better and better, and this one is my favorite. No, now this one is my favorite. And Jamie, I've kind of been in the same mindset as you, where I'm not like overly skeptical, and I'm loving Discovery. But when I sit down and watch it the first time, I find myself kind of raising my eyebrow here and there at certain things. Aside from one part of this episode that bothered me, and I think I figured out why. We'll talk about that later. This episode was a ton of fun. Like I didn't get bored. Not that I've gotten bored previously, but it held my attention, despite being a time loop and there being some repetitiveness within a time loop. There was so much there that the episode ended and I was like, oh my God, I love that episode. It was so much fun. And when I actually have a reaction like that, then I know it was good. So at this point, this episode has knocked out Context is for Kings as my number one. And I'm okay with that. This was kind of we'll call it a bottle episode, even though we've been on and off of the ship a bit. We haven't done a lot recently. But everything was kind of contained on the ship for this episode. And I really loved it. So while I do think that this episode obviously featured Michael Burnham the most, and Mudd, Stamets, I think, was kind of the MVP of this episode.
Totally.
I have a lot to say about him, but I will let you guys go. So Jamie, did you have any reactions to Stamets?
Well, I'm just fascinated with where they're going to go next, because obviously we've got this change in his behavior for the last couple of episodes, and I think the general fan reaction is, oh geez, I'm loving where his character's going. He's so much fun and interesting. But so where are they going to go? They're going to have to take some of the edge off him kind of appearing high all the time, but they're not. I don't think at this point they're going to be able to go all the way back to the kind of slightly surly or brusque Stamets that we saw in like the very beginning of the show. So what do you guys think about what their options are and where they're going to go next with his character?
Barry, what do you think?
Well, I think honestly things are going to come to a head with Stamets pretty soon. If you think about it, he's basically existing in what I would consider an altered state. I do not forget that mirror. Every single time I see Stamets and he's all chipper and happy, I never forget when he is there with the doctor. They're having that heartfelt moment and you just feel so buoyed up by it. And you're like, oh, this is wonderful. Look at this, loving, caring. Oh my gosh, right? All of a sudden it's this fear that you see, and there's got to be something. Like, he still looks contented in that mirror, but I think I fear, to quote a DS9 episode, or no, a Enterprise episode, we might have gone through a mirror darkly here, and I really think that things are going to have to start happening with Stamets, where all of this happiness and stuff is gonna turn pretty dark pretty soon here. So I think we're getting our last episode of where he's save the ship, find love. He's sort of the Data in this, if we want to keep the TNG thing. But my question is what else does he know? If he can see through time, what else does he know? That would be my big thing with Stamets.
When we saw the preview last week for this episode, and it had a lot of Stamets. I mean, we knew that Mudd was going to be in it, but it showed Stamets saying, like, if you don't listen to me, everyone's going to die, or whatever. And then we have the title. I kind of wondered if if the magic was going to make him go mad. And I still think that title could apply to him, and whether it was just referencing Mudd or whatnot, I think it kind of can apply to everyone, since it is a quote from the Iliad. And I don't have the quote with me, but it's the quote is like a love-centric quote. So in that way, it could apply to Stella, it could apply to Burnham and Tyler, but I definitely wondered here if we're going to see something. And they point out in the episode, I think it was, oh, I can't remember which character said it to him. So regardless, we've definitely seen him change. And I think that he was changing before he wound up driving the spore drive, because the minute that they saw that the tardigrade was, communing with the spores, he kind of got all, oh, this is so great, and I'm seeing this in person, and now he's certainly transcended on another plane, I guess. And especially with this being a time loop and having to watch all of his friends get killed over and over, like that's traumatic, right? Wouldn't you think that, because he knew every time this happened, and this happened, at least 53 times or 54 times, whatever, wouldn't that give him some trauma?
Potentially.
I think that might be why he snapped in the end. Yes.
Yeah.
And basically said, no more, I can't take this anymore. We're going to bring this to a head.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested to see what will happen. And I don't know that we're going to get it before the mid-season break, because we've only got 2 episodes left. And I feel like a lot of these little notes that they've kind of left open, like Jamie referenced earlier, I think that we may not see those resolved until the second half of the season. Jeff, what did you think about Stamets?
Yeah, probably not. But, well, I think that the affirmation that he's not tied to specifically to the timeline anymore, and he's immune from these time loops, explains a bit about what we see in the mirror. So I was firmly mirror Stamets on our last episode, but now I'm not so sure that what we're seeing is actually mirror Stamets, but maybe some sort of a crossover. Maybe he's existing between universes in a way, or part of him is and part of him isn't. But I like the fact that they use that mechanic, and the fact that he's being part of the spore drive has sort of detached him from our plane in a way that shields him from whatever this device is that Mudd is using. Scientifically, it's a pretty cool concept, but I'm not really sure where they're going to go with it now. This is one of those things where Discovery keeps throwing me for loops when I think I know something. It keeps changing my mind or making me think, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't really make complete sense.
Is that Jeff a good place to talk a bit more about Ash Tyler then?
Yeah, I think
we're on.
Yeah, I think so.
You were on the were you on the bandwagon or not on the bandwagon?
I was not, and I'm still
right.
not.
Yeah, I was, and now I'm going. Hang on a second. This and it's interesting actually. Talking to my sister who joined me in STLV this year, also a Trek fan. She kind of made the point that hang on, let's look at this guy. He's a great pilot, fighter, a good flirt, dancer. He's cute. He's insightful, intelligent, empathetic. He's cocky, and somehow he has 0 psychological effects from being tortured and sexually abused for 7 months. Something about that rings a little false. So, and in fact, it was called out in the episode. I think it is what you might have been referring to, Heather, is Stamets saying something along the lines of, you're pretty well adjusted for someone who's been, tortured for 7 months. And what's interesting is, I love the idea that Volk is Tyler, but it's kind of getting to the point now where, and I get the Manchurian Candidate argument, but this guy would have to be the greatest anthropologist, actor, kind of spy, and Volk didn't strike me as being James Bond to start with, really, did he?
No, not at all. But I think now, well, I'll flip it then. So I think, in my mind, all of the stuff that you're saying, Jamie, definitely makes sense and was a lot of the reasons why I was questioning the theory to begin with. But I think the end of this episode would have been the perfect place for him to reveal the fact that he was actually Vogue. There was 2 choices he could have made that would have won the war for the Klingons. One, he could have helped Mudd take the ship and Burnham back to the Klingons, or he could have killed Mudd and taken Burnham and the ship back to the Klingons. He had the choice right at the end. He could have done either one. His mission would have been done right then and there, all over, finished. But instead he chose to help them save the ship and burn
Right, but that's assuming that he actually knows that he's Vogue.
Yeah, well, something would have to trigger him if he was a Manchurian Candidate. There would have to be an option, an opportunity would have to arise where he would flip and capture the ship, right? I mean, this would be the perfect time for him to spring.
I suppose it might be, but if I may interject on this, I still think he's probably Vogue, but in the sense that does he want a victory based on some other guy doing this? He's a Klingon, right? How many Klingons does it take to change a light bulb? 2. One to screw it in, and one to kill him for it and steal the honor of doing it. So my thoughts there are, if we're going to end up seeing Vogue terms, not anyone else's.
Well, see, I think he would have had the option to do that. By killing Mudd, he would have foiled the plans of the Klingons who Mudd was conspiring with. Therefore, the honor would have been his for defeating those plans and delivering Discovery and T'Kuvma's killer to the Klingons himself.
But also L'Rell is not, perhaps her face isn't better yet, and she can't share in his victory, because I think he's definitely got a thing for L'Rell. So who knows? But that's where I'm at right now. Is I'm like, he's playing a ridiculously long game here. He's doing something deeper, but I don't know. I like the Manchurian Candidate idea as well. If anything, secret Klingons sure know how to dance. If anything.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I can buy is the Manchurian Candidate situation where he has no idea who he is, if he is Vogue. To interfere in any way, he would need to have knowledge of that. And I don't think, for one, that anything is going to happen without L'Rell being there, because L'Rell is the puppet master. And so if she is not near him to trigger him to do anything, I don't think he's going to do anything. I don't think he's not aware that he's Vogue, so he's not going to jump on any type of opportunity. All that being said, at this point, I don't want him to be Vogue because I'm in love with him and he is mine. Along with many, many other Star Trek people out there, I think he has got a fan club going at this point and has stolen the spotlight from my previous love, Captain Lorca. But and I also have a crush on Tilly now, which is saying a lot, because in the past I have a love-hate relation. Well, I don't hate, but a love slightly annoyed with Tilly, and I really do adore her, and I thought she was just great. I think drunk Tilly is another word for the word cloud this week. People really seemed to adore drunk Tilly, beer pong Tilly, and we did see Tilly have a serious role as well with the Gormagander later on. But I don't know. We'll find out about Ash Tyler sometime, right?
Mm-hmm.
What excites me about that is that if Vogue and Tyler are not the same person, the writers have thrown us all for the biggest fake out you could possibly imagine, and that would be I would be sitting there going, well done. That is impressive to have fooled an entire fan base on that front. So that'd be great.
Yeah, and I still like the thought that, and this episode also reinforces this a little bit more. Just like I had my Vogue anti-Vogue stuff last time, I also had a couple of pro-Vogue things. And this one, I think we also had some support for the theory that the relationship that he's developing with Burnham may give her the opportunity to not only be this person who started the war, but the person who ends the war, by convincing him that humans aren't, what the Klingons thought they were, by him actually falling for her when they do spring, the Manchurian thing. If that's truly the case and he realizes what he had with her, maybe that will be enough to make him, the peacemaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely thought about that. So I think that's a good theory that may happen down the road. But all right, well, let's go ahead. There's a lot more to talk about, but let's pop into our next segment, Play a New Track, where we explore what we've learned that's new about the Star Trek universe. So Jamie, why don't you start us off? Did you learn anything new in this episode?
I think the first thing I learned that was new was that parties in the future can be kind of a little bit more like the 20th, 21st century kind of parties that we see today. Traditionally, Star Trek has the concept of parties in the future has been, a bunch of streamers and, Worf standing there in the corner having baked his Tarkovian pound cake or whatever it is. And, I know we've had Bashir have a 30th birthday and everyone's standing there with balloons and kind of pointed party hats. And this seemed a little bit more realistic with some, a little bit. I imagine everyone enjoying their synthahol and a bit of beer pong and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's alcohol, and at this, I don't think it's synthahol yet.
Yeah, you don't think it's synthahol at this dance? Yeah.
Well, our sweet Tilly. I mean, if you looked at Tilly's eyes, they were a bit glassy. So if there's not synthahol, then there's some other substance going around the ship.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, that's not my kind of scene. But I thought it was great that we actually saw something a little bit different, and that was something that it certainly brought to the Star Trek universe. One thing I learned that was new was, and it was a kind of real throwaway line right at the start of the episode in Burnham's log, which was that Starfleet is winning the war, specifically based on Discovery. And I found that interesting because I don't know if that's going to be a setup for what happens in the next couple of episodes, but that hadn't been immediately obvious to me that, it was clear that Discovery was important in the war effort, but not that it had, was the single factor in them actually now starting to turn the tide and winning the war.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah, I had that written in my notes too, that it was a nice status check on the war, because I thought the show was going to focus so much more on the war itself, and we really haven't seen a lot of episodes dedicated strictly to that. So it was nice to hear, that Discovery is doing a lot more than what we see on the screen. So obviously it's been out there, winning a lot of battles that we're not seeing.
Yeah, I've heard some chatter this week about that fact, and that, they kind of sold this season to us as being about the war. It's the Klingon War, and we really haven't seen a lot of the war. We did in the prologue, right? But since then,
we saved a few kids on a planet somewhere. That was
and then we've seen direct interaction with Klingons, but not so much the big scale war. And that same, when we learned that, we also learned we've got 10,000 people dead, which is a lot of people. But that was little Ash Tyler's little speech at the party.
There's one other thing I learned, which is that there is no end to the number of peaceful, space-dwelling, whale-looking things in the Star Trek universe. I know Galaxy's Child had one, Tin Man had one, Elogium had one, and here's another one. Just there seemed to be a whole, there's a large number of these creatures just happily wandering around space, waiting to be discovered, and giving CG artists the world over excitement and for their imagination. So anyway, I thought that was fun.
Starfleet didn't need to, take this one and turn it into, torture it to make it run the ship, and they saved it. Usually we blow them up not realizing that they're sentient, and this time it was kind of like, no, Starfleet has this standing order. You can be court-martialed if you don't save this endangered creature. Yes,
which I thought was a nice little idea.
No, I was just going to say that was one of my what did we learn was that we have the Endangered Species Act still, and that we have a sanctuary for these types of animals somewhere. But I thought it was nice that, again, here's Michael Burnham showing some empathy towards this animal, as she did with the tardigrade, and as we've known her brother to do.
Absolutely. No cesarean sections either for any space creatures either. That's nice to see.
Yeah, I was also glad to know Starfleet is part of the conservation effort, and they're out there actually trying to save some of these creatures when they run across them. So that was a nice side function for Starfleet.
Yeah, I really identified with the Gormagander in that it's always looking to eat and forgets to mate. I got one laugh. Thanks.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Barry, what about you? What did you learn from this episode?
Well, firstly, I learned that that maybe poor Saru and his ganglia are as useful as Deanna Troy's empath abilities. Those purple crystals, he wasn't ganglying any time during the entire thing, so I'm wondering if it's going to be an unfortunate Deanna Troy thing where he's like, my ganglia will tell us when there's danger, and then there's a bunch of danger, and he just doesn't
what's going on with
notice.
those ganglia?
Yeah, where were his? I was looking. I watched it again today, and I'm like, where are your ganglia? Which should be a T-shirt at this point, I think.
Yeah. I don't
Also,
know that like he needs to be like 5 feet away because now given the little weaponized dark matter marble things were on the ship because those were found in Lorca's man cave, I'll call it. So those had actually been there the whole time. We had just never seen them until now. But you would think that when they're on the bridge and oh, here's this space whale and we need to bring it in, like you would think at that point that like the ganglia would have popped up somewhere, although depending on which loop they were in, it all happened differently because when we first meet him, Mud comes out of the oh gosh, let me start over. Gorgamander. I have the worst time saying this thing's name. And then another time they're distracted by the Gormagander and then Mud beams in to the spore drive area. But you would think that like he would sense Mud or something somewhere.
You'd like to think that, and yeah, so that was kind of where I was like, is this on purpose, or are they just kind of doing what they did with Deanna every now and again? Another thing is a lot of people I've been speaking with really were like, why are they playing like 20th century music? This doesn't make any sense. Well, first of all, if you abbreviate the name of the ship, and they're all running around with T-shirts that say disco, so I would say playing a disco song isn't completely out of the question. And also for them to be mildly historically inaccurate, because they're not playing the Bee Gees song, they're playing Wyclef Jean.
Yes.
From 2000 and something or other, and I owe that to probably a podcast or something that I heard earlier that someone had mentioned. But definitely, I would also say in terms of previous Trek parties, I'm really glad that they didn't have green space symbols for drum sets, and it wasn't just Picard and Data and them playing the violin all the time. So yes, it's a lot more realistic. That's another thing I learned. Finally, just sort of as a bit of a joke before I get into one of my one serious part, there's a lot of people have been saying that, oh, is this, actually the Kelvin timeline? I have definitive proof. If you remember in the 2009 Star Trek, Spock goes from engineering to the bridge in like 2.1 seconds. In this one, it takes them a long time to go from one spot to another in the turbo lift. So that right there proves it to me. This is prime universe. It has to be.
But you can go directly to sickbay with a turbo lift.
Well, you can just beam there apparently, which makes me go like, why are there turbo lifts on the Enterprise D if you can just beam everywhere? But I don't know. Anyways, one other bit though that I really liked was just the side note mention about this crystal from a 4-dimensional race. And for me, I'm like, prophets maybe, or wormhole aliens, depending on what side you're on. Is this a Q thing, or maybe it's the Traveler? Where did Mud get this? And that was something that I found fascinating and would love to see explored further. So the other thing I learned was we are already interacting with 4-dimensional races. Is that going to get pursued? So yeah, those are the things I enjoyed and learned about this episode.
Pretty cool. Jeff, what about you?
Well, I was mentioning backstory moments earlier, and I think we got some really good ones, like the little story of Stamets and Culber meeting. I thought that was really, really nice. Another really cool humanizing moment between two people. I thought that was wonderful. And I like how it dovetailed into Stamets giving Burnham the never hide who you are advice. I thought that was a really great moment. And I love the Mud backstory. We finally get the true backstory of he wasn't searching for Stella. In fact, he was trying to escape from her and her father, the arms dealer. So I like that. That's the way they wrapped it. So I like that they even gave us more backstory into Mud and how he wound up back with Stella, because we know he was with Stella at least in the TOS days and trying to escape from her then. So I was wondering how they were going to pair them back up, and we know he's going to escape yet again. So I'm wondering if we're going to see him on Discovery again after this, or he's going to remain sequestered away with Stella as requested by the Discovery crew. So that remains to be seen. But two really cool backstory moments there. And kind of more of a heady thing about the time loops themselves. I like that at least the early two loops show that time loops aren't necessarily written in stone, and there's still some free will. There were some small dialogue changes between the first two loops that weren't necessarily related to anything Stamets was doing to intercede with Burnham and Tyler. Just some of their interaction at the party was a little bit different. Some of the dialogue was a little bit different. So it just makes you think a little bit about, free will and how it affects these loops, because you'd think they would be pretty much identical if everything was predestined. But I like that they can vary a little bit. It just gives you a little bit of food for thought about how time works in the Star Trek universe.
That would definitely make you think about our homage episode here, Cause and Effect, and how that was kind of the same thing over and over despite the little changes. But I really love the editing and the way that they edited all these loops together so that you really, aside from those first few, you weren't just seeing a repeat of the same scenes over and over. I think it lended a little bit of confusion towards the end of the looping. I've heard some people that thought that Burnham and Tyler were aware, like Stamets. And I don't think that was the case. I think it's just the way that it was edited. We're not seeing, we're not seeing him tell her that she's never been in love and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, not gonna rehash.
Yeah,
it'd be a 6-hour episode otherwise.
Yeah, I think there was slight confusion there, so I just wanted to clarify with that. I also had that same question of, are we going to see Harry Mudd again? My answer is I don't know, but I really hope so. I love Rainn Wilson as Harry Mudd. He's done such an incredible job, and we've already mentioned so much of him. I knew that he was going to be in this episode, right? Because I did watch the teaser. I had no idea how he was going to make his entrance, but the moment that Gormagander started opening its mouth, I knew what was coming. I did not expect him to walk out with an Andorian-like helmet. So that was, I immediately thought Andorian, and good thing I watched After Trek because they did confirm it on there, and that was an intentional homage to Journey to Babel. So that was kind of fun.
It's a surprise they didn't get Jeffrey Combs to play Mudd in this episode.
Yeah. I'm secretly hoping maybe we'll see him down the road in another iteration. Who knows?
Well, the Shran was at the Battle of the Binary Stars. The USS Shran.
True. Yeah, that's true. So that was all really great. I loved a lot of his dialogue. We did finally get that scene where Burnham was like, "You're mad," and he's like, "No, I'm Mudd." And I've loved that since we saw that in previews before. He had a great quote: "There really are so many ways to blow up this ship. It's almost a design flaw." That was just such a great line. I think any Trekkie would love the fact that was said there. When they're talking about, how he could have done this, they mentioned that he had robbed a Betazoid bank, and we don't get another mention of Betazoids until TNG. So that was a lot of fun. I think there was one other. Oh, right. So I definitely caught it when he said "Adieu, mon capitaine." Like everybody. I think every Star Trek person had to have gotten that reference. But I noticed in my rewatch that right before he said that, he called him old man.
Yes.
And I just was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is awesome. Because now we've got a Dax Sisko quote and then this Q Picard. So, and I did find out that was also the Mon Capitan was definitely intentional. I think that came out in After Trek or on Twitter from Ted Sullivan maybe. But although I think, as I said, the MVP of this episode is Stamets, and I'll talk about him a little bit here in a second. Rainn Wilson has done such a good job, and that goes to his skills as an actor as well as the writing for his character. The only thing that pulled me out of the episode was that final scene in the transporter room with Stella and her dad. I don't know, like I'm watching it and there was just something about it where I was like, oh, I really don't like this. And I think it's Stella herself. A lot of people have mentioned that it felt very TOS. And I get that, and I do agree with that. I think that this is so weird, but I think that her bright clothing, which is very TOS, distracted me, as well as just how her character was. It was kind of similar to what happened to me with Tilly, where Tilly is just so different that you're just not expecting that. So I really wasn't expecting this Stella to be this way.
It's a tough ask though for the writers to, because they got to kind of meld this with the original series, and it's a little it's always going to feel a little off to kind of smoothly transition into the kind of casual cultural misogyny of 1966. So I thought they did probably as good as they could setting up what they had to set up at the end of it.
Yeah, and the second time that I watched it, it was easier for me to watch. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe it was just that she's just so bright and there and has a strong personality, which is what we would think of Stella, right? From what we've seen. And I felt that this character had the reins on Mud and was reeling him in. And so the second watch, I liked it a lot better, and it didn't really pull me out like it did before. So props there for Mud. I think that we've kind of talked about all of the things that we've learned that I had down. I had mentioned the weaponized dark matter earlier, and I thought it was interesting that was one of the things that Lorca had already. There are 823 ways to die in space. I didn't know if that was literal. I assume so. Anything else you guys can think of to point out?
I just think with the ending, definitely sort of a TOS feel. I almost felt the ending was sort of a Scooby-Doo ending, where I was almost expecting Mudd to say, well, I would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for those meddling kids, sort of feel, and maybe almost a Voyager convenience to the ending. I always found Voyager had these amazing plots that make you go, how are they going to get out of it? And then something just sort of almost like, waha, see, we managed. It's also like they go into their bat utility belt and had, time loop proof underwear on the entire time or something like that. And so
yeah, it really was a Scooby-Doo ending though. You're right, Barry, because they did the investigative work behind the scenes and then kind of sprang it in little bits and pieces during that walk down the hallway into the final reveal when they beam Stella and her father in, and you're like, oh. So I thought that was a really cool way to wrap it up. I was like, I had no idea that was coming. Did any of you actually see that ending coming?
No. I do have to quickly point out that before it happened, when Mudd thought he had won, he said, "Nobody beats Harry Mudd,"
Yep.
which totally comical. But no, I didn't see it coming, and I love the fact that they did that. I just did. Oh gosh, I think it's season 3 of Enterprise retrospective over 4 episodes, and they all did something similar where there was this twist, and so it reminded me a lot about that. I really love these little twists, and I didn't expect it coming, so I thought that it was a great ending overall. Jamie, what about you?
Perhaps it could have been better along Barry's on the line of what he was suggesting if we'd finished the episode with all 5 of them kind of standing around laughing as the camera slowly fades out. I think. I think that might have been the perfect conclusion to a kind of TOS style ending.
Yeah, that would be pretty funny. All right, so let's go ahead and move into Spin It Again, where we look back at the moments that stood out to us. I have some stuff to talk about. I'll go last. So Barry, why don't you start us off?
Well, thank you very much. Again, obviously my first thing, I'm a TNG baby, grew up during that period of time. Definitely was my gateway drug into all things Trek. So definitely, the homage to cause and effect is a good thing. But sure, they have a time loop episode, so we've got a very similar house, but the furniture was so very different. And again, kind of coming from the idea of an English teacher, we're always making sure that our students come up with unique ideas and stuff, or at the very least, they always cite their sources. And I do feel very much that this episode and all previous episodes so far have really cited their sources. They're not taking credit for something else. They're citing their sources and putting a new turn on it, which I think is really valuable. And that's really stood out, especially in this episode. Obviously a bit of the whimsy of TOS or the animated series, coupled with some of the still some plot devices that are going to carry this forward. I mean, if I was to say this, maybe preempting Dan and Bill a number of years later and they get into it, I would not skip this episode. I would see it. But for that, you really do get a bit more of a character driven episode too, right? Like they haven't been at war. This isn't isn't another franchise that also has the word star in it. We're not going to go and see the ships going around and pew-pewing each other and blowing up. This is character driven. You're learning about people here. The big thing in that, in terms of who we learn about, is though Lorca plays a bit of a back seat, boy, is he single-minded. He just seems so frustrated that he's not killing Klingons right now. Like, we have to save a space whale. Oh, fine. Let's just do this. Let's go jump and kill some Klingons already.
I don't give a damn, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just he is so incredibly upset that he has to not be killing Klingons right now. The other piece that stood out to me again with Lorca was the several deaths he has, and I don't know if maybe I was just in the right frame of mind of it, but though Jason Isaacs is a fantastic actor, I can tell he is having so much fun dying so many times. Like when he's like crouching over himself or he's disintegrating into nothing, you can just tell Jason Isaacs must have been like, all right, do it again, hit me again, just wanting to get blown up or shot into space again or something. It just seemed like the actors were really gelling as well. I like to see that. The other thing that stood out as well was bringing the idea of a love story for Burnham into this. And I guess for me, obviously, she is our main character. And I would say that several episodes into this, people were saying, yes, this is passing the Bechdel test. We've got a strong, independent woman doing these things. But I do feel like she is the hero, and like male counterpart heroes in Trek movies previous or Trek TV shows previous, she can find love. She's allowed, right? And I don't think it's going to define her character. If anything, it's going to help her bridge to her humanity a lot more. Mm-hmm. So seeing her test the waters with a bit of a love interest and stuff like that, I don't see threatening her strength. I don't see it threatening her individuality, nor do I see it threatening her drive to be a meaningful member of this crew. She is not beholden to Tyler. She's interested in pursuing what she feels for him, and I think that was made very loud and clear as well. Obviously coming from a cisgendered male perspective, I would leave it to more qualified people to say that for sure. But that was sort of my impression. So yeah, I mean, overall, I had a lot of fun, like I said before, this episode, and I guess for me, it's like they definitely had a serious tone to a lot of their stuff over the last little while. I guess to a degree, I'm wondering what's going to happen the next time the writers need a break from the serious storyline that they have going, right? So yeah, that would be the measure of what stood out to me.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you pointing that out about Burnham's agency and her budding love affair. I do think that they portrayed it in a way that really showed her in control, even though she's really not in control. She doesn't quite understand what's happening to her emotionally, but she listens to Stamets' advice, and she says, I'm good with honesty, right? And so, once again, here we have Star Trek teaching us about communication and how important it is to communicate, which I just adore. So not only does she recognize that, next time that she sees Tyler, she takes the initiative and engages him. And, I loved when she asked him to dance and she's like, will you lead? And because she was leading Stamets to begin with, but I just thought that showed her being able to give in a little bit. But she did it in a way that it wasn't, him taking the lead or him sweeping her off her feet. It was a direct question. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was just nice to see her ask that instead of let's just have Tyler come in and sweep her away. I found that as a way of her taking control in that situation.
It's an equilateral relationship. I don't feel like one has a monopoly over the other in this. They're both seemingly finding their way. And if this is Vok hiding behind a human mask, he's finding his way as much as she is. And yeah, who knows, right? Like, or if it is Tyler, he's pretty chill, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, he definitely he listened to her when she said, these feelings are complicated, and he was like, yeah, cool, I'm here. No rush, work it out. Then there was the nice little, well, I missed sad to miss our first kiss, which, okay, whatever, could have done without that, with or without that. It didn't take away from it, so I didn't mind it. But I like them together. Like I said, I have a crush on Ash Tyler now, and I don't want him to be Vogue, at least not a bad Vogue. But I think that Shazad Latif is a really, really great actor. I haven't seen him in anything else, and he's just kind of walked in and taken on this role and has created a character that I'm really enjoying. So I'm interested to see how this dynamic will continue. And for all we know, we're not even going to see any of this in next week's episode. It's possible that, given that next week's episode is definitely geared towards Saru, it looks like with some other elements, we may not get a continuation of Ash Tyler and Burnham until the mid-season finale or next season. I guess we'll see. Jeff, what did you want to call out again?
Well, building a little bit more on Burnham, I think there was one really significant moment that we really haven't mentioned yet that I think defines a really significant part of her character, and that's that she elects to commit suicide in this episode in order to help save everyone from this time loop. She swallows the dark matter, the weaponized dark matter, killing herself in a very painful way in order to force Mudd to restart the time loop. I think that was a huge gamble on her part. I mean, a pretty good chance that he would do it, but at that point he had the discovery. He had called the Klingons already. He knew how to operate the spore drive. His mission was pretty much done. He was finished. But she played him well enough, and she took a huge gamble in killing herself in order to try to save everyone. So I think that's a huge sacrifice, and I think it speaks a lot to her character overall, along with all the other great things we've learned about her in the last few episodes. So I thought that was pretty significant.
Can I just say that if I need to die, then I'd like to eat a dark matter marble because it looks relatively painless.
It's supposed to be the most painful way to die, wasn't it?
But it doesn't. I mean, it may be that she's so Vulcan that she doesn't feel that or something.
It looked pretty painful when he killed Tyler with it.
It happened so quickly that it's just kind of gone. It was very similar to one of the ways that Lorca got killed as well. Really neat effects. I think Lorca got shot. And it kind of incinerated him or whatever.
Yeah, that special weapon that was in his room, right? Yeah.
Blunderbuss looking thing. But really just really neat effects. As we see Discovery blow up, and then we see Lorca die a million ways, and then these dark matter marble things. So a shout out there because it was cool to see that. Yeah. But go ahead. I think you might have had something else.
Very cool. A couple other things. I think Saru didn't have a lot to do in this episode, but there was one really incredible, tiny, short little moment when he stops Burnham from trying to charge at Mudd on the bridge, and you can see there's some wonderful nonverbal acting on the face. You can see the concern in his face that he has for her, and not wanting to see her get killed in the same way that Tyler just got killed. Right? I thought that was a really nice little tiny moment between the two of them that showed some real genuine concern and caring for her.
And she listened.
And
right?
she listened.
Yep,
she did.
And that shows some development. So since we last saw that scene with the two of them where he apologized, the one where they set the tardigrade free, that stuck, that communication there. Yeah. So absolutely. Very telling.
And just a quick nod to the brilliance of Harry Mudd, the character of Harry Mudd, the fact that he thought to put his ship inside an endangered creature, knowing that was an easy way to get on the Discovery. I mean, he knows, Starfleet has an obligation and standing orders to help these creatures and to rescue them. He knew that once, he crossed paths with the Discovery, Lorca would have no choice but to bring that creature aboard the ship. So giving him
no good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was brilliant. I love the fact that he knows enough about Starfleet and regulations that he could game the system and weasel his way onto the ship. So very, very cool. That's about it for me.
Awesome. Well, I have a couple of things to mention that we've actually already touched on. That was really Jeff that touched on these things, which does not surprise me. No, it's fine. I will just revisit them and do my thing. So in the opening, after, we're getting the personal log from Michael and she's talking about everything that's going on, she says, I seem to have found my place on this discovery. So she's found that she's fitting in, right? She says, I am among the others, but also a part. And I found that resonated with me because I often feel like, I have a lot of friends, but sometimes feel other still. So I thought that was kind of cool. But then, of course, she's like, tonight we are having a party. And she says it with this sense of dread, which seems to have resonated with a lot of people in the Trekkie community this week. So I thought that was kind of fun that she said that. But Stamets. So Stamets gets, as I've said like 3 times already, my MVP award for this episode. Aside from just the incredible range of acting, we've seen angsty Stamets or whatever you want to call him, and we've seen one with the mushrooms Stamets. I really, really also loved the scene, which I lovingly called "Dance with Me for Science." I tweeted earlier this week. I went and right after I watched the episode, I went and took screen caps from the scene where they're dancing and when he's telling the story about how he and Dr. Culber met. And, he says, love isn't logical and the never hide who you are. And look, I know that wasn't a direct message to the LGBTQ community, but to have our gay character making that statement in Discovery brought me to tears. And I was just really, really touched by that and by that whole scene. I thought it was so sweetly done. I loved hearing their story, and I loved the representation that we saw in this episode because aside from learning about Stamets and Culber's story of how they met, we also had another gay couple in one of the dancing scenes. There were 2 women dancing together, which I really loved. And then outside of the LGBT community, we also had someone in a wheelchair, which I assume he may have been injured in battle, but he was in the beginning where Tyler was doing the speech and made a nod to him. So again, I love seeing representation in Discovery. And when I look at the crew, there's just such a variety of ethnicity of humans, of species diversity, and an LGBTQ presence, which just makes me so happy. But anyway, so Stamets. So yeah, that even the second time that I watched that scene, it brought me to tears. And I really loved the fact that when they were done, they're like, well, okay, our time's almost up. And they held hands like as the ship started to explode. I think it's been great to see the bromance. I think some people are trying to call it, even though Burnham's not a bro, but there's a definite bond and friendship developing between Burnham and Stamets. And that is just a standout relationship for me there. Such a great job overall with Stamets in this episode. And then the final thing I wanted to call out was the quote. I think it's like Heather's quote corner. I'm going to start calling this part of the show since I'm always pulling out quotes from Discovery. So as usual, nods to Star Trek Room, the writers, for all of the wonderful work that they do. But this episode closed out with Burnham saying, just as repetition reinforces repetition, change begets change. Sometimes the only way to find out where you fit in is to step out of the routine, because sometimes where you really belong is waiting right around the corner all along. And that quote just resonated very strongly with me. So as usual,
rhymes too.
Yeah. It's just really beautiful writing. And in this instance, I felt like Star Trek itself was speaking to me. So there was so much in this episode that just affected me on a personal level. And that is why it has taken the #1 spot as my favorite, and just continues to reinforce, as much as I want to wait until this first season is done, every episode I'm just like, man, this is my Star Trek. There's so much about this series that just speaks to me, aside from seeing myself in Burnham. I think that the entire crew, or at least the main crew that we've seen of Discovery, they're all the other. Like they're all misfits. There's something different about all of them where they're not the norm. They're not the characters that we've seen in TNG. They're not what we're going to be. They're who we are now. And for that reason, Discovery just is quickly becoming my favorite Star Trek ever. So that being said, was there anything else that you guys wanted to touch on before we wrap up the show? Jamie?
Maybe just a quick mention of you. I mean, you mentioned the dark matter bombs, which were described as being the most painful way to die, and in fact appear to be, quite pleasant, really. But one thing I noticed when I first saw the first episode, and Ash Tyler goes up in a kind of purple mist. And I went, aha, he's a Klingon because he's got purple blood, and I thought that was a signal for that. And then I realized, no, the writers have got me here. It's the actual bomb themselves that are tinged purple, and then when Burnham went up, she went up in a purple tinge as well. So either Burnham's a Klingon as well, or no, the writers have got me. So anyway, I thought that was a nice little bit of misdirection there. Other than that, I would. Heartily endorse all of the comments on what stood out from you guys so far. So that's all from me.
Awesome. Barry, what about you?
I would say the only other thing that I would just caution the writers on is don't hurt Dr. Culber. I definitely have a bit of a soft spot for Culber. I want to see his character developed more. His pin just came out for fansets, and I need it. It's he's a character, and also just Wilson Cruz as a human being is easily one of my favorite people in the world as well.
Did you watch After Trek?
I didn't, sadly.
Right.
My only Trek after trekking that I do is this fine show and discovering Trek. I try to leave everything else out so I can stay as pure as possible.
He was lovely on that, wasn't he?
Yes, I know that After Trek has really mixed reviews, and admittedly, I started to watch the very first episode and quit after about 5 minutes because it's just not my type of thing, and it's still really not something that I really want to watch, and that I'm not into any of these after show things. Like when I watched The Walking Dead, I was never into that, but I have found that they give out a lot of fun little tidbits that sometimes I post on Twitter, and I've got one to mention here in a second. But they had Wilson Cruz and Anthony Rapp on together, and I know at least that Anthony Rapp is in a relationship, and they look very, very happy together. But man, like Wilson Cruz and Anthony Rapp are so cute together in person. And Wilson Cruz especially, I think I tweeted something like, Stamets stole the MVP role for the episode, but Wilson Cruz stole my heart in After Trek because he is just such a lovely, lovely person. And I loved his little displays of affection. He would put his hand on Stamets' arm. And they talk about the characters like they are them. So I don't know, guys, if you go back and watch that episode at least, because it was just really great, and Wilson Cruz is adorable.
Well, Barry, you got to be careful about keeping the doctor intact, because did we see another medical officer in this episode?
Yeah,
I think we got like
puff of smoke.
Yeah, I think he I wonder if he's the CMO, because I think he had a commander pips on or something. So I don't know whether that other medical there was someone else in a white coat down there with the Gormagander. So at least if something does happen to our doctor, there's a replacement there.
Well, to quote Commodore Decker, he was the CMO. Not anymore.
Man, I think people will be very upset if something happens to Dr. Culber. And yeah, maybe we'll find out about that other dude and who he was. There was also a woman in medical uniform walking in the hallways at one point whom we haven't met. So, again, there's a lot of people in this ship and we have no idea who they are. but that's typical for Star Trek. And, I look forward to seeing who we are going to get to know. I think, did I say the thing? Yeah. On After Trek, really quickly, they mentioned that the random communications officer man that Mudd threatened on the bridge does have a name. He is Lieutenant Junior Grade R.A. Bryce. So at least these characters that we're not really seeing a lot of have names. Like all the characters on the bridge have names. And quick shout out that we also got to see a little bit more of the augmented alien, or I think they called her augmented human. That was a misstep. The first time they showed her on After Trek, they called her an augmented alien, but then later was clarified on Twitter that she is a human. And she had like one line in this episode, but several face shots. So we got to see her makeup and her augments very clearly. So that was a lot of fun. Jeff, what about you? Anything you want to point out before we go?
Yeah, well, I hate to end on a dark note, but one thing that we didn't mention was just how scary Lorca's private arsenal and research lab is getting. Every time we learn something new about the stuff he's got in there, it gets more and more frightening. Where is he getting this stuff? I mean,
he's a collector.
Oh my God! Not only was
he had like John Wayne's pistol in there or something.
I know. Yeah. What else does he have in there, man? What are we gonna find out about what he's holding on to and how he's planning to use any of this stuff? It's pretty cool though.
Is it just a man cave or is it Lorca's little shop of horrors? Will we find out? Yeah, again, and like, I just can't wait to see what questions get answered, because we've had a lot of these little things that, Jamie mentioned when we very first started the show, like the black badges. They get mentioned in Context is for Kings, and we haven't heard anything about black badges since then.
Nope.
What are some other ones? I was going to do like a whole list and I didn't get around to doing it. But Lorca's Tribble has disappeared. Where's the Tribble? What happened to the Tribble? I need to know. We have a whole episode where we don't see Admiral Cornwell at all. Apparently we're going to see her in the next episode. But, we haven't seen Voq. What happened to Voq? Where are the matriarchs? What happened there? Are we going to find out what happened when Voq went to the matriarchs? There are just a lot of loose ends that I think will be tied up. I'm just like, I love the fact that we can't binge this. Like, I love talking about Discovery every week. I love watching it and then watching it again and taking notes and talking to you guys. And like, this is my life. Watch Discovery on Sunday, record about it Monday, listen and talk about it the whole rest of the week until Sunday again. But I'm like really anxious. Like, man.
It's a good controlled diet though, because I mean Halloween has just passed and I'm doing my utmost not to binge on all the candy we didn't give away. And so yeah, binging on other stuff is what happens all the time. My partner loves Grey's Anatomy and watches it all the time, and nothing wrong with that. And I definitely have my shows that I watch. I binge out on Deep Space Nine quite often, and yeah, I can kind of almost glut on it. And you're right, this allows you to not do that, and I think that's important because it gives us time to think and to sort of let this all kind of percolate and grow into something. And so yeah, when things do happen and we're right, we celebrate. And I find when we're wrong, we kind of go, oh wow, Jamie had mentioned that he would applaud. Jamie, you're saying like I would applaud if something different happened with Ash and
totally.
Mm-hmm. And that would be so cool. So yeah, I agree with you completely, Heather, that this diet of Star Trek that we're getting is fantastic. And it harkens back to the old times, right? With TNG and Voyager,
A lot of people.
It's a little bit more convenient though this time. I had to through all of DS9 and Voyager, I was like, I had to reserve a thing at our video store and go and walk down there, and I'd get on VHS 2 episodes at a time because it wasn't shown on TV here. And let me tell you, Netflix is a lot easier and a lot more convenient. In fact, I downloaded it and was able to watch it on a plane flight. So yeah, I'll take that over VHS any day.
Yeah, I know there was a lot of talk before we knew about the format and how the show was going to come out, and a lot of people really wanted the convenience of binge watching it, just like Stranger Things, which we mentioned earlier somewhat, and that dropped this past weekend. And so all over social media. All of my friends are watching it. And then I start to see spoilers and I'm like, I don't have time to watch that right now. So I would have been devastated if Discovery had come out that way. And, I would have like taken off work to binge it. But I just get like, if that had happened and someone watched it in a day and then started talking about it, and I have tried to keep myself away, like I've muted the words for Stranger Things and it hasn't worked well, but I just can't imagine having things like that spoiled before I even get to watch it, and B, it would have been, we all watch Discovery within a week, we talk about it for a few weeks, and then we're just sitting around kind of waiting, whereas we get an episode and then
this is much more satisfying.
Yeah, we spend the whole week talking. And I think this was just the smartest thing that CBS could have done, because we're not just talking. We're not just saying, oh, I love this show or I didn't like this show. We are coming up with these fan theories. And I here at Tricorder Transmissions, as we've stated, we're a positive centric network. We like to be positive and talk about happy things and be optimistic. So we like to have constructive conversations where we can take a critical look, but still kind of work through and in the end come out with optimism towards where Discovery is going to go. Other people are out there watching it and doing the opposite and kind of picking it apart. And I tend not to pay attention to that. But hey, at least like people are talking and doing that and just getting really involved. I mean, if you want to hate watch it, okay, that's your thing. But it's just so great to have this spread out now, because even though we only have 2 episodes left and then we'll have our little break, it's coming back in January. And then we've got the other, 6 episodes. So we have 9 this season or this mid-season, and then we'll break and then we'll come back and do 6 for a total of 15. But
speaking of the format, I was just wondering whether my stream was right. Did they have no teaser for this episode? Like, is that
correct.
The first time they just went straight into the credits?
Yeah, no teaser, no.
Yeah, they just thought it may have broken up the story, poorly, and that's the kind of stuff you can do on streaming, I think.
Yeah,
you can make those kind of decisions.
I was going to mention it. Normally I sit down and I basically write all of the episode down in my notes and then have it broken down like scene by scene. And I didn't get to do that this week since I haven't felt well. But I was like, oh, okay, no teaser there, but that's all right. And then it opened up with a personal log, and we haven't seen a personal log from Burnham since the Vulcan Hello. That episode opened with a log from her. So I thought that was kind of nice to connect that. Before we go, I guess I will ask, I had heard some of the pushback I've heard is that this episode just felt so distanced from everything else that's been going on. Like they're really, aside from mentioning how many deaths there had been and that they're winning the war, we went right out of having Cornwell, captured by Klingons into, hey, Discovery's having a jammin' party. I really didn't even think about that. I just it was like you get on a roller coaster, and once you're on, man, you're on. You're not thinking about what happened last week. So I was on for the whole ride. What about you guys? Did you feel like this episode didn't fit? Yeah, I guess that's the question. Barry?
This is the thing, and I really try to stay away from a lot of these arguments. I try to stay in more positive Trek forums and conversations and stuff, because I honestly, I have to say I've had it with people who just want to hate the show. So they got angry that it's serialized. I can't believe it's serialized. This is not Trek. Da 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 da. Now they're mad that they have an episodic episode. Like, pick a lane, people. A lot of shows get panned for being fan service and stuff like that, and whatnot. And maybe to a degree, this is the writer saying, we've taken a lot of liberties with Trek canon. We've done a lot of different things and whatnot, and so here's an episode that some of you might all recognize, right? Something a little more whimsical, something a little bit lighter. Every single Trek series has had this, to varying successes, right? I mean, like, this wasn't Move Along Home, so we're okay there. But yeah, my response to anyone who has a problem with it at this point is, like, I don't know, take up tennis, learn the guitar, play the flute, walk dogs at the SPCA. Please do something more constructive with your time, and let us enjoy our show. Let's be critical of the show, absolutely. But if you're just here to hate watch and to rile other people up, you're the problem. Thank you very much. Go away now. I hate to be so just about it, but I've really had it. Like I love this show. It's fun. It's interesting. It's definitely causing me to think differently. I love. I forget who mentioned this, but it's a ship full of misfits. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
What a great show. What a fun episode. Bring on the next one, and bring on the new shows after the break.
What about you, Jamie?
I couldn't agree more. I think, if anything, I'm relieved that there's an opportunity for a little break, a kind of little bit more of an episodic episode sprinkled in amongst, the larger serialization. I mean, one of the great things about going to STLV, to tie it back to the group, is you get to interact with a bunch of these kind of people. And I was lucky enough to meet Bo Yeon Kim, the writer, the Discovery writer, who was at the convention. And I spoke to her about it, and she said, "Oh no, there'll be opportunities for kind of lighter episodes here and there, and self-contained, more self-contained episodes every now and again." And I was kind of like, "Okay, well, I'm sold." So you kind of get the best of both worlds, right? You get the joy of the serialization over a longer period of time with these kind of seeds sown that aren't going to pay off for ages, at the same time as you get something like, this episode, which I think was just a rollicking ride, great. More self-contained episode, and you finish the episode and you go, how good was that? So that's kind of where I see it.
Awesome. What about you, Jeff?
I wasn't really bothered by it. I think the one confusing thing was I was trying to figure out through the personal log, we get the impression that Burnham's had some time to sink into her role and make friends, and it made me wonder how much time has actually elapsed between the end of the last episode and this one. It just seems like it had been quite a bit of time. So we
started with a montage, right? That could be any time between a day or 3 years. We're not sure.
Yeah, so you wonder what state Cornwell's going to be in when we finally do see her again, if she's been with the Klingons for an extended period of time, right?
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get that answer next week, because they do seem to answer our questions. And just like the fact that, Stamets even gave the little jab to Tyler about, oh yeah, you were in prison for 7 months. You look awfully good for having been in prison that long. They kind of acknowledge that they know these things, like the things that we kind of pick out like that. They see that, and so they generally answer them at some point if they don't just address it in some way. So I think we'll find out then. I don't know. I love the episode. It definitely started off and I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. What are we doing here? And like I said, it just, once I was on for the ride, and it was a lot of fun. I loved having disco on the disco. I gave in to the disco craze the other week and pre-ordered my disco shirt. I just had to, which we did see people running again in this episode. And one of them did say, like, on your left. So we were talking about, running through the corridors and how you would run into people and everything. So they do have manners on the Discovery.
And proof they don't have fully functioning holodecks. Because presumably you would go there to do your exercise if you really needed to. So, yeah.
One would think. Well, great. I agree with everybody, and I think that I can speak for Jeff when I say that we are also done with the negativity. That's just nothing that we're ever a big fan of at Tricorder. As I've said before, we are all for being critical, and I think in our 6 episodes of the show, we've certainly we've been that. We've criticized. We said, I didn't like this, or this stood out to me a little odd and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I think, Discovery is a good show. And like you said, Barry, do something else with your time. Like there's so many ways that you can give to this world. I don't know why anyone would spend it just hating a show. And on that note, we do have plans down the road to do an episode. We just did a shore leave about harassment on social media that'll be dropping pretty soon. And after some conversations I had last week with some of the news surrounding Anthony Rapp and just some stuff that's happened, I felt that we needed to do a special DiscoTrek supplemental talking about some of these issues, including the general negativity from the other side of camp. And I'll talk about that when we do that episode, but I'll just leave you with don't feed the trolls, right? There's really nothing is going to come from sitting on those websites and responding to comments. I know that a lot of us really want to. We want to defend the good work that the crew at Discovery is doing, but at the end of the day, like, you're not going to change their minds. So, like, put your energy.
You give them a platform doing it too.
Yeah. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, they want to do that, and they want to continue to rile us up for whatever reason. I don't know, but I like to spend my time talking about things that I enjoy. It's really healthy for you and improves your quality of life. So I recommend that, everyone do that. And frankly, interacting with these people causes a lot of stress. And so I would just advise everybody to move along and let's just focus on what we love, with some constructive criticism of what we may not love. But overall, Discovery's great, and we are Team Discovery, and we will keep supporting Discovery as we go through. I think at this point, we're not going to get an episode that changes our minds. Yeah. So we have talked a lot about some of the comments that popped up in our unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas Facebook group. Thad Hate mentioned the CMO potential dude. And again, there's some discussion of his rank. So we'll agree that may be CMO. We'll find out, hopefully, down the road. Marty Alley, Disco on the Disco. And William Conlon pointed out that Wyclef Jean, though he just says they used Bee Gees Staying Alive as part of the musical track. And then, Barry, yes, you're right. It is a Wyclef Jean like remix of the Bee Gees, but still I found that song pretty apropos for this episode. Let's see. Yesenia is also in my camp. Lieutenant McDreamy Face. I can figure out that is Mr. Ash Tyler. And she also loved how they condensed and changed up the repeated scenes. That party looked pretty fun. Made Stamets really likable finally. And I didn't even mind the cheesy ending. Hadn't been a fan of bringing Mudd into this series. And I think the story easily could have been done with a different baddie, but at least I don't mind him as much now. This is now my favorite Disco episode. So lots of support for this episode. Jason Steinmetz says, can't believe there are only 2 more episodes before we have to wait for more. And I'm in agreement there. The holidays are great, but I'm going to miss Discovery. Jeff, I don't know if you had the comments pulled up or if there was anything that stood out to you that you had picked out.
My browser just crashed on me.
Oh, no.
Sorry about that.
Well, I could take this opportunity to plug the new podcast to the Patreon folk. We are very excited to have potentially an author on coming soon who wrote Trekonomics. I actually just got the book today, so I'll be reading through that. We're going to be doing a case for the Traveler pretty soon. We're going to be seeing if we can get the illustrious Jeff and Heather on our show as well pretty soon, talking from everything from martial arts in Trek to the concept of, spirituality in Trek to, oh boy, so many other things that I'm now not thinking of because my browser isn't open either. So I've now stalled out. Jamie, to you, how are things in Australia?
So I love the fact that we get a lot of Stamets love in the thread here too. I thought Christina's comment about Stamets becoming her favorite is awesome because I looking back on my initial opinions of Stamets back from episode 3, I've eaten my words many times about that character, and I love him more and more and more with every episode that we've been getting. He just keeps getting better and better and better. So love to see all the Stamets love in here. And I love, there's a comment in here from Vincent about Mudd getting his just desserts. I thought that was pretty cool, a pretty cool comment. It was Mudd had such control for the entire episode. It started to feel really bleak and hopeless. So I like the fact that we can point out that Mudd finally gets his comeuppance there in the end. And so, a couple of really good comments in there. And always nice to see so many of our Facebook group members having these great chats about these episodes.
Yeah, we love watching all the comments. Vincent also pointed out that Tilly is talented at space pong,
Yeah.
which it reminded me in that episode. I just have to quickly shout out that despite being, I assume, inebriated, because there was she did kind of act like drunk Tilly. Despite that, when the dude went in to kiss her, she was like and did not let him do that. So major props to girl power there for not letting him plant one on her face. I just, man, yeah, total. I have a total crush on Tilly now. I just adore her, and she has the best hair, the best. All right, so I think we're good. Thank you guys for coming on. We love this, our first international show.
Shout out to the Commonwealth.
Thanks, guys, for having us on.
Yeah, we appreciate having you pop in from the future. So I guess it's about that time. Jeff, I'm going to try to do this myself, okay? And okay, so let's tell everybody where to find us online. Jamie, where can people find you if they want to talk about Star Trek?
Well, I'm on Twitter, so JMac, JMAC _ref, REF. But I don't necessarily suggest that it's a great follow unless you're interested in, passive aggressive American politics retweets and, comments about rugby union and every now and again Star Trek. So, but go your hardest. Always happy to talk to a Trek fan about anything.
All righty. And Barry, what about you?
You can find me on Twitter at Bjorn DeFjord, BJORNDEFJORD. And you can also find me on Facebook under the same name. I tend not to friend people I haven't met in person. I got that from you, Heather, and it's a really good idea. But also, if you want to follow the brand new Tricorder Transmissions podcast, PoliTreks, I am one of the co-hosts along with my dear friend, Shashank Avaru. We're going to be dropping our first episode right away here on this very wonderful podcast network. So keep your eyes to the skies. I lost that one, but anyway, yeah, great episodes coming that way. Yeah, keep your ears to the podcast. I don't know, whatever. Yeah, that's coming up right away. So yeah, just watch out for it. The Twitter page is already open, and so is the Facebook page. Just look up PoliTreks, PoliTreks.
Awesome. Jeff, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me at Warp Factor Jeff on Twitter. And also, if you are looking for more information about the show, you can look at the tricordertransmissions.com or contact us on Twitter. We have several different handles. One, Disco_Trek, of course, for this show, and Tricorder Show for the entire network.
Awesome. You can find me on Twitter at LLAPosper. And then Jeff and I, along with our friend Jesse Akendo, moderate the unofficial Star Trek Las Vegas convention group, which is the way to get on the show. We do have some questions to ask if you join us. That way we know you're not a robot or a creeper person. So you can find us there. We invite everyone. It doesn't matter if you've been to the convention. Really, the point is just that we wanted to provide a way for fans to talk about Discovery. So even if you don't intend to go to the convention, although we really want you to come to the convention, or at least a Star Trek convention, please come join our community. We're a positive, safe space for all Star Trek fans, and you will see our DiscoTrek posts. So good luck commenting, and we will see you there. And again, thanks to all of our Patreon family. We adore you all. We are the Tricorder Transmissions on Patreon if anyone else wants to join us. So I think that's it. Did I miss anything, Jeff?
Nope, I think you got it.
Guys, I'm all grown up. I'm an adult podcaster. No, that's weird. I am almost a professional podcaster, I guess, or something like that. So thanks so much for joining us here at DiscoTrek on the Tricorder Transmissions. We will see you in, well, I was going to say in a week, but this is Thursday. And so we will actually be talking to you again.
Not here.
Yeah, on different guests, but next episode will release on time on the 7th. So you will see us next week for episode 8. Until then, live long and prosper.